Okay, well, thanks for coming back. We're going to get started with our first panel discussion this morning. And I want to introduce the moderator, Nicole Bradford. She is the Executive Director of the Transformative Technology Lab, and she's going to introduce herself a little and then also her colleagues.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Yeah. I feel like I'm so glad that you came to this panel. I feel like this panel is probably one of the most important panels of the entire conference. I really believe that because it's deeply tied to human potential and all of the digital things, including the metaverse and everything that you've been reading about. So my name is Nicole Bradford, and I'm the Executive Director of the Transformative Technology Lab. In addition, many, many years in gaming, including overseeing World of Warcraft China. And now I work on a really, really big game that I won't talk about. So the way that I love to do my panels is we're going to have a section where you're going to get to hear from my lovely panelist, my amazing, brilliant panelist, and then we're going to move to a section called the dinner party, where you're going to get to hear our questions for one another. I think one of the things that happens often at conferences is that you don't really get to hear the collisions, the kit bashing between the work that we all do. So just to get us started, so Nicole Bradford, next to me is Erica Siegel. She is a research scientist at Omnicept AI. And then Elizabeth Novogratz and Suki Novogratz, who are the co-founders of Maloka, which is a product that I am so excited about because I think it addresses some of the fundamental issues that you see when people are talking about a metaverse that has no humanity in it and no humans in it. And so, panelists, what I'd love for you to do is to share your why. Share your why this work, and in the process, tell everyone a little bit about yourself. So,
sure.
Erica, what is your why?
Yeah, so I'm Erica Siegel. I'm a research scientist, but I am sort of a academic reject. My why is that I think it's really important to have good science when we talk about things like human potential or research in industry or thinking about biometrics of any kind. And so that's kind of my why. I want to bring, the best of science to VR, AR, MR, all of it.
And you've been at HP for how long?
Just about 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a research scientist at HP Labs, if I didn't say that.
Great.
I'm Elizabeth Novogratz, co-founder with my sister-in-law, Suki Novogratz, of Maloka, which is a meditation mindfulness game for Oculus Quest. And there's a few whys, but the original why really, we kind of came...
Oh, please.
They want us to scoot over.
Oh.
Musical chairs.
Okay. We kind of came to VR with the path of most resistance. We really weren't fans of mixing meditation and tech in any form, mostly because we thought we were kind of purist, and meditation really changed my life in such drastic ways, and I was so attached to the power of it. But we both wanted everybody to do it, and so we spent a lot of years writing books, going on workshops and teaching, and really trying to get it out there. And someone came to us and said, someone on our team now, and said, hey, what about VR? And we both were like, no, we don't even want to do an app. And then the next day he came and put headsets on us. And literally in 10 seconds, we were like, okay, let's do it. And since this process started, what we've really learned is, first of all, so many people's biggest problem with meditation is not that it's hard, but getting themselves to sit there and do it every day. And when you do it in a headset, the distractions are gone, you're there, you're present, and we're like, oh my God, this is a way to really bring peace and just a better life to so many people. And so that was kind of the original why, and then they've really expanded since.
Exactly. Suki? So Suki Novogratz, co-founder. Maloka with Elizabeth, Beth. I think she explained a big part of Maloka. And my personal why was that, meditation saved my life, like hands down. And I had the privilege of access and money to sort of, go all over the world for my healing. And at the end of the day, I realized all I needed to do was sit wherever I was and that I could find my home. And my why was just like, everyone can do this. It's easy, and I wanted to make it as accessible to everyone. And VR was a way that we thought, yes, it's a friction. You have to have an Oculus headset, but there's so much potential there to bring this to more people and for human flourishing.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm curious, how many people in this room meditate? Put them up. Great. Yeah. Actually, the reason how I got into transformative technology as well is that I was operating World of Warcraft China. I was overseeing, at that time, one of the biggest branches of one of the biggest games in the world. And I went on a meditation retreat in between moving from Shanghai to Hong Kong. And I had a profound experience. I had, one of the things you may or may not know is that thinking doesn't actually make a sound. So if you hear yourself speak when you read, if you hear your voice in your head, that actually happens around 4 or 5, but thinking doesn't make a sound. And so what happened to me is I lost that sound for like 4 months. And as a result of not hearing the voice in my head that also criticizes you and scares you, I became ridiculously happy and fearless, and I wanted it for everyone. And because I was on the back end of World of Warcraft, seeing data around connection and relationships and community, I said, technology and this go together. And it was at a very, very radical time to say that. And so that really brings us to, why are we all here? So right now, everyone is talking about the metaverse, but if you think about all of the headlines, it is either a fully digital future where we're sort of like, maybe it's the Matrix, but without the scary machines, but there's that vision, or it's about how do you move the bits around? So Microsoft's enterprise metaverse, wonderful, but it's like there's not a lot of humanity in it if you're thinking about it. And so, what I'm interested in and what I think this panel really represents is a very humanistic stack. And so the stack is the physical layer, the real, where the molecules are and where we touch one another and feel one another. And then there's the transformative layer, that augmented layer, which is a big part of this conference, which is where a good example would be, it's where the physical things often get translated into digital. So if you think about your heart rate variability monitor, it's tracking your heart, which is on the physical layer, and it's turning it into a digital signal that then makes it digital. So that's the transformative augmented layer. And then there's the fully immersive, fully digital layers where the metaverse is, but also where the digital twins live, whether they're of cities or of people. And AWE is one of the leaders in really understanding this transformative layer. And so, what we're all interested in is really how that stack is interoperable and how it becomes deeply supportive of being human and having your full aliveness when we are together. And so with that, I'm going to have each of my panelists talk about their work for about 7 to 10 minutes. And so you can understand, because this headset that she's working on is badass. I don't know if I can say that online.
You just did.
Badass. Okay, my dear.
Okay, so just for a little bit of background, I work on the HP Reverb G2 OmniStepped Edition. The OmniStepped Edition, which I think people have talked about from my team and my group at different parts of this conference, is essentially a state-of-the-art headset that also has a series of sensors, physiological sensors.
Video if you want.
Oh, great. Apparently they got the video, so you guys don't have to hear me sort of muddle through it. Could you guys start it? Is that possible? Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. So so we have a series of sensors that are essentially built into the headset. And those sensors are eye tracking, pupillometry, right, which is, here we go. We'll just go ahead and get started. This is yours.
This
not
is
mine.
ours. This is ours.
This is not the right video.
Well, it's okay. You can do this one, and then we'll do the other one.
Okay.
Everybody, you can roll with us, right? Adaptability.
Yeah, I feel like that has been the name of the game, right? We're all out of conference practice. So, so we have a series of sensors that are built into the headset, and what I do is I try to hit my microphone, is I try to make meaning of those sensors. And so my background is in an area called psychophysiology, which is trying to make meaning of the mind from the body. And so we use information from those sensors in order to do things like, actually, Nicole just mentioned it very briefly, there's a lot of work that goes into taking information, like the actual sensor information about just your heartbeat, which is the biggest electrical signal in your body, and turning it into something like heart rate variability. So we do things like that, which is very low level, but we also have a series of AI inferences that make meaning or make predictions about what's going on with you while you're doing a task. So the first one that we have released is cognitive load, which is a sort of a strange sounding term, but it actually just means the amount of mental effort that's required in order for you to be able to do what it is that you're doing in any given moment. And one of the things that's really great, but also sometimes challenging about the work that we do is that, we're not really providing a turnkey solution. So it's not like, you just go in world and then there's your cognitive load. What we're doing is we're working with developers in order to take things like cognitive load and eye tracking and pupillometry and turn them into something that's meaningful for them, right? And so we have partners across the spectrum, right? From training to, soft skills to, A/B testing and designers and architecture firms and a host of different people that are taking this information and incorporating it into their own workflows in a way that's really creative and wonderful. And what I really like about this panel in particular, especially the way you framed it, which was really beautiful, is it's true, we want to be human about it, right? So there's a way in which all of the information I've just described can be really scary sounding. But if we're careful, if we give people information about what information we have, if we let them, remove consent or delete their data, people are really willing to make the world more personalized. And I think that VR and things like physiology and information from your body can really change everything. And so do you want me to talk about inflection points now or later?
You're right, actually, let's do a little bit later.
Okay, so I think that's my large pitch, and I think the idea of framing this as a human story, where it's not just a company that is collecting data on you and then selling it to someone else, but in fact is allowing you to use information from your body or use information from your attention or your behavior in order to make more personalized experiences, in order to make a world that is helpful for you in a way that often, I think technology isn't. Sometimes technology knows a lot about us, but doesn't allow us any agency in that space. And so I feel very passionate about the human aspect of this. So I'm really glad that was the framing. And that's a little bit about the work that I do. If you're interested in learning more, Omnicept is the name of the project that I work on. I work in the research arm, so I'm a senior research scientist in that group. And we are always looking for partners. So please feel free to, search us, come find me. I'm Erica Siegel. We would love to talk to you.
Great. And now Maloka.
Yes. So, a few things, but one thing I think that Suki and I really both have held on to this entire time has been not losing the essential, what keeps the human connection of meditation, really. And that was our biggest fear of if we put this up here, are we going to lose this? Mm-hmm. And what we've found through a lot of trial and error is no matter what, the more you sit and the more you get out of the chatter of your brain and you really allow yourself to just be present and not judge your thoughts, it's super helpful. It will change your life. It is magical what happens. And what we learned years previous to this was the big resistances for most people was it's too hard, I don't have time, I don't want to do it.
Or it's boring.
Yeah.
Right? You go and you're sitting there well, did anything happen to me, right? And so what was really sort of exciting about VR was that it was sort of like you're held, and suddenly like, like your sort of observer self is like right over there, and suddenly, and your eyes are open and we have this like vortex, and suddenly you're watching something and you're held, in a way that, like that is less challenging than when you're doing it all by yourself.
Yeah, and you're safe.
Yeah.
It's not as vulnerable.
And the safety thing is important because, like, say people who have had sort of, have PTSD, what have you, sometimes meditation is challenging because they don't want to close their eyes.
Yeah.
It could be re-triggering. Yeah. So when you have VR where your eyes are open and there's a safety there, there's just so much benefit.
And then by
didn't realize.
by gamifying it and rewarding people for showing up and having all of these great places to go and portals to go through and things that are growing and your spirit guide's growing.
And it's fun.
It makes it, you want to come back the next day, and people are coming back the next day because not only do you leave feeling much more connected, but there's this game element that really gets people to show up. And that was our biggest resistance with people all over the world. Constantly, it was like, yeah, I did it. Would you do it the next day? Well, no.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
the biggest.
One of the things that I really loved about, so I see a lot of products and sort of which are the ones that I get behind, and the ones that I tend to get behind and really raise up are the ones where I think they really, they've made design decisions that are benchmarking for the rest of the world to understand how to do it well. And so I think I would love to show your video because
show it.
it's just like when you see this, you'll really grok what they're talking about. Can we do the video now, guys?
Same one you started earlier.
Same one, the one with the eye on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically like Tamagotchi meets, an incredibly valuable well-being experience, which isn't confined. The attributes don't simply accrue digitally. And that's a really important point because when you meditate, it shows up, we were talking about this, it shows up at Starbucks, it shows up at a lot of different places. And so we are now entering the dinner party. So with that, you're just gonna see us talk about, about what we're really into. I love how you made that design decision. It's like, it's not high score, congrats.
No.
It really is, very motivating and actually I think the moment when I talked to Xander and he told me about it, I was like, I've been waiting for this, is what I told him. I've been waiting for this product. So talk a little bit about how you came to this design or this way of it connecting people to the practice.
I think a lot of it was we'd been talking about, Suki and I, and Xander, and somehow it was kind of trial and error, and it was kind of what really made us feel at home, and what made us, I think because our resistance was so like, we were so holding on to real life that this magical, like very open and welcoming and not too, it wasn't too pointy and things could grow and evolve. It just felt real as VR and fantasy
I
could
think it sort
feel.
of really came together when we sort of were trying to think of this inner world, right? That this thing that happens when you close your eyes and you're like, oh, and how to bring that feeling, like what does that look like? And that's where it came to like this island, and how does this inner flourishing in here then sort of plays out in real life?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so then that sort of got activated to sort of like, wow, we'd love to have someone there with us. Because, Beth and I started, and I had a meditation buddy. So that's when the spirit sort of evolved as sort of, and then everything's sort of taking on a life and a narrative based on sort of like essentially us closing our eyes.
Yeah, and what we were really actually doing.
And not wanting to see, it wasn't going to be reality, because when we close our eyes, it's not. So we didn't want, I mean, there are many meditation apps that you go and you're in Maui, and that's wonderful, but we wanted something where, that was sort of, like that you could tap into, that was the real but not real, but yours, and reflecting your inner flourishing.
Yeah, what I really love about it is that it always feels so warm to me. So sometimes, I think I've said this to you guys before, but I have spent a good amount of time in like digital meditation spaces, and there's a way in which it's like, everything needs to be stripped down to nothing. You're sitting on a heart, and like, I understand why that's useful, but there's a way in which sometimes it feels like competitive or something. Like I am the most uncomfortable in this meditation space right now, right? Like there's a meditation teacher I really like, and he's always like, Buddhist monks turn the water to cold, and when they take showers, and I'm like, okay, like I understand, but there's something so warm and inviting about that space, and that is a part of meditation. That sort of like letting go. I mean, your point about PTSD I thought was so lovely, which is like, the benefits of meditation are about presence and about, just being able to be comfortable in your own skin in the moment that you're in. And I think like that sort of a warm space could be really healing.
Yeah. Well, so like one of the reasons, so for everyone, so the reason why this is the most important panel you might come to at the entire conference is this. If you are tracking the software line, so outside of AR, VR, if you're tracking the software line and the number of tasks, like a lot of times when people think about automation, they only listen to how many jobs are being automated. That's not the important part. The important part is the number of tasks. And the tasks that are left are tasks that I call deep human tasks. So it's the things that the things that we do well, the deeper a human we are. So adaptability, working together. Like the tasks that are left are going to be about humans solving problems together, humans creating things together, humans having flashes of insights together. And one of the things that happened during COVID, besides for learning how to garden and all the other things that we did, is that automation accelerated, depending on who you talk to, by 5 to 7 years. And so what's left are these deeply human skills, which we don't teach in our society. We don't teach them in our schools, with the exception of Finland and Montessori.
And Montessori.
Yeah, it's true. And so like this is what's left. And so how do we, get these types of skills into the population at large? And so, and then how do we get it so that it's not just benefits that accrue to the digital? Like I remember one time when I was at Blizzard, someone asked me who my high-level character was. And certainly I had them, but my instant reply was, oh, it's me. Like,
Yes,
I'm my high-level character, right? But, so a lot of times in these digital spaces, the benefits are accruing to the avatar. What this represents is the benefits accruing to the real avatar, because life is a role-playing game, right? It's accruing to the real avatar in ways that contribute to deep human skills. And then what her work is about is, is starting to get the sensors and the ability to witness these deeply human skills, because all of this stuff shows up in your biosignals, and then creating the ability for people to train against it. So would you talk a little bit about that kind of stuff that you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, so I think that the framing of this conversation has just been so lovely, because sometimes I think I've already said this a little bit, but I think there's something sort of scary about the idea of taking information from the body and using it to make predictions about what's going on in a person. But our digital devices do that already, right? They do it all the time. That's what TikTok is. That's what Facebook is. Those algorithms are just taking information from our eyes or taking information from our, the speed of our flicks and turning it into an environment for us. And so there's a way in which this type of an inflection point, like these types of conversations, allow us to have deeply human conversations about this type of technology that can be for people, like for actual humans. So a lot of the work that I've done, and I think, at the beginning of this panel, I mentioned that I think it's important to have like science, for example, inside, like deep, good, real, cutting edge science inside of these types of projects, because one of the things I have worked on for a really long time, long before I was worked in industry, was this idea of using things like positive affect, right? So just like feeling good or pleasure or, having like positive sensations and using that as a way to mitigate really painful, awful, negative sensations, or using information from the body to understand when a person needs to come out of a situation. So years ago, I worked with academic that was doing some work with kids with autism, and they used information like skin conductance, right, which is sweating, to understand how nonverbal kids with autism are about to lose it, right? When because they just don't have the same type of communication that we do to say like, I'm uncomfortable, And so this is the kind of work that I think is really exciting. And like I said, I can only advocate because the work that I'm doing is really like for you, right? It's for practitioners of VR, it's for developers, it's for content creators. And so, I do my very best, and the rest of the people that I work with most certainly do their very best to try to make things that are context specific so that it can be personalized, it can be used in a way that's safe, right? So I think one of the sort of unfun things I spend a lot of my time talking about is data privacy, data security, making sure that people know what data has been collected about them and know in a meaningful way, right? So that they can say like, oh, actually, you can predict Alzheimer's with tracking data from VR. Like, I don't think most people understand that that's the case. And so, they give away data without knowing what that data can be used for. And so, one of the things that I think makes this type of work both really exciting and also really hard is that you have to kind of be a bummer sometimes so that people can really understand, like, I own this data, I need to own this data, and here's how I, get a hold of it or delete it or know who owns it. I gave a talk recently, or I was on a panel recently in Germany, and I was like, I think we need more federal regulation, actually, because I think that we need to have our government have some information about, have our backs a little bit about this. And they were like, well, we've never heard an American come to Germany and talk about federal regulation, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But, we really rely on GDPR, so.
Yeah. Well, I think, so what I'd love to do is the sort of like the round of like, what is the inflection point? What is the thing, so for your vision of having people have this really accessible way, not just to meditate, but also, many other, things that, that support their health and well-being. What is the thing? Like, what are the inflection points? What needs to happen either socially or from, a business environment thing for this to be, accessible and available to everyone so that they can get the benefits of meditation in their lives?
Well, luckily, because of COVID, and mental health being such, like on the forefront of everything now, it's not as challenging talking about self-care, meditation, and wellness. So that's a big, benefit from even when we started this whole journey way back. But still, having agendas, like say at schools, and universities, and
Healthcare.
and healthcare, and having it's still not inexpensive having the Oculus, right? So like having the headgear. So there's still that friction, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But as it does get cheaper, as these sort of as the apparatus gets less cumbersome and more accessible, but it's really for me personally getting the word out of like our dream when we started this whole project is to get 100 million people meditating. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, when you sort of can transform that in people, then everything else sort of follows.
And can't people access the islands, or they can connect in a crew based on their phones
Yeah.
too?
Yes,
So you
yeah,
guys
yes.
are that's another
Yes,
thing that's
there is
important
that.
design standpoint, is multi-platform.
Yeah.
Yes, there is that. But there's something about VR that is VR done this particular way when it comes to meditation that is incredibly impactful.
But yeah. And we'd love to see it being used in mental health across the board. It's just been so successful already. But to have meditation in VR be just more of a part of the practice and just used in healthcare and mental health would be massive. So schools, mental health,
Yeah.
yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, my big one is the closed loop system. So the inflection point that I think would really take this all of this type of technology and turn it into something bananas is when we can take information from the body and change an environment regularly without a lot of latency, in an environment like you're even talking about, where you could totally imagine something like heart rate variability or respiration, just having this incredible way of changing the environment as you go. I think for this type of technology, there's for training, you can imagine it being really incredible if people are doing things so there's a lot of work in PTSD, for example, in VR. So you could imagine using information from the body in order to change an environment. The technology is there. The technology to have things be really personal in this way is absolutely there. We just need some creative content creators and some, excited real world practitioners to come together and do something amazing.
Yeah. And then for me, the inflection points that I'm looking for, so one, it's really interesting. In 2015, when I basically said that technology could be used for the human inner landscape to heal, grow, and thrive, people thought I was absolutely crazy, right? 2015, I was crazy. 2016, I was crazy. 2017, I was interesting. 2018, I was really interesting because it was the beginning of a lot of the high-profile suicides that people who no one ever expected. Their lives really looked like, they had the most amazing lives. And in 2018 was also when men started coming forward saying that they were being willing to say that they were having mental health issues. And it's also when the government got really serious about veteran PTSD. So all that happened around 2018. Then 2019, I would talk about this stuff and people would be like, oh yeah, that's important. But they still thought it was a vitamin. 2020, I was right. So 2020, 2021. And so, a lot of the companies I was working with in, before that were sort of struggling, they just really hit their marks. And I'm so very happy for that. But, the mental health part is just the very beginning. It's the foundation. It's table stakes. After that, it's all of the human interconnection stuff. That's with future of work and being a part of what's happening. And then that next level is sort of really about human performance, purpose, the evolution of our species, because, we're at a place where our technology is on exponential curves and our crises are too, but human growth and development is still linear and analog, and we have to close that gap in order to really wield the power that we have. And so for me, the inflection point, one of the most important things is that we have got to get the data privacy, sovereignty, security right. Yeah. Because she didn't even tell you half the scary stuff.
I know.
It is, because a lot of times people will also have, the reaction. And especially because I talk a lot about emotion recognition, because I'll tell you, it's psychological state from gait, the way that you walk on camera compared to the last time you walked, which is used in many airports in certain parts of the world. It's really good.
Oh, so good.
It's really good.
Creepy, high level things.
Ability to sort of suss arousal levels, which is sort of sometimes color maps to heat in the body off of your Wi-Fi from outside your house.
Wow.
Totally doable. It's possible today. So, when people tell me that, I say, like you don't even have the imagination to, to think of the worst case that's possible, even today when these things get looped together. So what we have to do, like the inflection point, is really coming up with the things that allow people to use these things in a safe way, which includes, I think there is a regulatory layer for sure, but it is also, we need an AI intermediary.
That's right.
You need to have someone
Who tells you.
You need to have an AI who works for you,
Right.
who doesn't belong to anyone else when you buy it or you take it or you grow it or whatever it is. It is dedicated to you. And as you are walking down the street and you're moving from one IoT halo to the next, it is negotiating contracts and because of your parameters, you have designated things as either public, private, or for sale. And it is doing that as you walk, online and off. That's absolutely what we need. And by the way, it is not that far away. There's a lot of people who are working on that.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the keys. So we have to get this piece right so you feel comfortable, using your neural link. You got your AI intermediator in between you and Elon saying what's okay and what's not.
That's right.
So,
And on that positive note,
Yeah.
no, but I think it's really positive
It is
because
positive.
people
It
are
is
really
actually.
working on
It is,
it.
yeah.
People are really working on it. Okay, so in the 5 minutes we have left before Q&A, 10 years from now, what's the vision? What would you like to see? Like, it's 10 years from now, so, maybe you're past the 100 million. Like, what does the world look like?
What does the world look like? Good question. I see a world like we're in this metaverse where we can have a place of healing. That we can write that script, we can rework narratives in a safe place, using the biometrics, right?
Yeah.
That can tell you that feedback with your own awareness practice for your own human flourishing.
Well,
That'd be the dream.
And you can't really change systems without changing individuals. And when you are making people just be, better humans because they're aware and self-care and self-love and, it just expands. And so if you have a world of people who are doing that level of self-care and meditation and mindfulness, and it changes systems, it changes everything. And so there's a lot of potential for a lot of goodness.
Yeah.
yeah. So I feel like maybe something like democratizing technology, democratizing wellness. There's a way in which when everybody's hands went up, when they were like, how many people started meditating? I'm so curious about how many of those people started meditating during the pandemic. Like those of us that have resources, have the ability to use technology to make our worlds better, like over and over and over again. And I just want that for everybody. I want everybody to know, like, I want everyone to be able to have an environment where they put on some glasses and, they have signals from the body that are suggesting that they're, maybe a little bit overwhelmed, and they can immediately go into a space that feels safe to them, right? I want everyone to be able to get a prescription for some sort of specifically tailored positive mood induction so that when they're really stressed out or when they're doing something that is incredibly complex or hard for them, they can just have a safe space, right? I mean, and those are just the ones that are sort of off the top of my head because of the nature of this conversation, but I want that. I want this to be democratized and for technology because, I mean, really, it's not expensive compared to things like, 6 years of therapy or something, right?
100%.
And so everybody should have access to it and everyone should be able to take this and, have it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, a little known fact is that the reason why I got into the video game industry in the first place is because I wanted to launch the holodeck. Like really, that's what I want to do because I grew up in Houston, Texas, a little black girl in a white neighborhood, and and I would watch Star Trek, and in that I would see, a humanity that for the most part had gotten on the same page, and we were about the business of discovery, right? And so it just inspired me so much. And if you think back to the holodeck, we all know for sure, certainly one thing that probably happened in holodecks, which was not on TV, but the other thing that you saw, right? But the other thing that you saw is people revisiting the past and recontextualizing that story, right? And people, working out issues, and people using these spaces, to understand what they thought and felt, and to recreate the narratives about themselves. Because the thing about humans is that language and story is our organizing, operating system. And the ability to have these digital environments that allow us to not only heal our past, but to imagine our future, that is the why of this whole thing. So with that, how many people realize now this is the most important panel
Don't
at
answer
the whole time?
that.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now questions. Any questions? Oh, yeah, and I think there's a mic up here so that they can catch it online.
I love the term you're using about transformative technology. And obviously a lot of the kind of purposes you're talking about and the trends of curing PTSD or trying to help people with PTSD also align with there's a renaissance in psychotherapy and policy around psychedelics. And a lot of imagery you're showing up here is about psychedelics. And I'm just wondering, like, I'm not going to ask if this is a conversation that's happening, but when you're, what are some of the concrete examples of how people, you were talking about the 10-year or what might happen in the future, what do you actually see people, how are they using VR to explore and do any of these worlds align? Yeah.
So the question is,
So how are they using meditation? Like you're talking about they're meditating with VR, and I'm just wondering, is it guided meditation? Is it like obviously there's some obvious answers there, but what can you talk about, like really exciting ways that you're seeing that this that the technology is actually helping people to meditate, other than the biometrics? That's a feedback loop, obviously, but what kind of content are we talking about?
I think that's a great question for you guys, because people are using the systems, and so you're seeing what people are doing with it and how it's helping them create a practice. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, well, it's a focused meditation, but yes, to your point, psychedelics were a huge inspiration for all of this as well. I mean, studies have shown that your brain in VR is very similar to your brain in psilocybin, like creating that plasticity. And so, we were all very inspired by that. And in terms of how it's being used, we're right now currently, we're with a group of doctors and seeing how it impacts them in terms of, we don't have the biometrics, we don't have the HP, but we're using Whoop to sort of do a longitudinal study to sort of see how it's impacting. And from without the data, their first impressions is like, oh, wow, that really sort of helps me relax. It helps me change my state. It helps me regulate my nervous system.
Right.
But we're still waiting to sort of see what the actual numbers say.
Interesting.
But so far, I mean, the results have been pretty positive from just a personal commentary on it, but that's very different than what the data will say. So.
Yeah, and I imagine what you're saying is sort of like, you're seeing people establish consistent practices.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because it's like, so that people often ask me, like, what's the best meditation technique? And I'm like, the one you do.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
So.
Yeah. And for us, we have different portals. We have a meditation portal, which is the vortex, which you saw. We have the stretching stone, which is embodied breath work, sort of a light yoga kind of thing. And then we have the sound bath. And, when I first was going, I was like, oh, I don't know if the embodied breath work is really going to do it for people, but okay, I'm willing to try that. But then I have my friends who are just like, oh my God, embodied breath work? Like, that's my jam. And I'm like, really? Not my jam, but hey, I'm glad it's for you. Because they're more kinesthetic, And so so it's nice having those different outlets.
Yeah.
And also they can create their own sort of routine. Like, oh, I'll do embodied breath work, then I'll do a little vortex, and then in the evening I'll do a sound bath before I go to bed.
That's right.
So,
Different times of day too. Yeah, for sure.
I love it. I love it. Oh, another question.
Hi, I'm Xander, a different Xander than you guys were.
Hi, Xander.
Hi. My question is about the ecosystem, and this is probably maybe first, Nicole, if you could address it. Like, who are the key players in the ecosystem that's going to bring this technology to the masses? So like distribution platforms, hardware platforms, other partners, consumers, of course, and what markets do you see adapting it first?
Well, so each one depends on, transformative technology covers all of the ways that you can use technology for the inner landscape. And so different ones are in different stages of advancement, specifically because we're at AWE. It's sort of the inflection point that Suki mentioned. It's like the smaller these devices get, the better. And so the people who are working on, getting the devices small, HP, Vive, Oculus, like everybody, and when the Apple glasses finally do come out, these are all going to be very, very important things. One of the things that's happening on the back end too is just the compounding of the exponential technologies. Because simultaneously what's happening, over there, for example, is, AI-driven materials discovery. Most people are just focused on AI-driven drug discovery, but all of these things are going to get glasses or, and the components cheaper, smarter, faster, more durable. And when you look at a lot of the estimates, they're not including that, or they're not including adjacencies that will accelerate the tech. So like if you look at the timeline on the Brain Project, which is essentially the human genome for the brain and the connectome, none of their models are built on having quantum computers or biological chips, which are also like accelerating pretty quickly. And people doing that type of work will probably be first in line to get it. And so depends on the area. I think they're going to want us to get off the stage.
Oh, it's our time.
It's our time. We just got started too. It's like, and I want to thank you.
I think we have. Wait.
Oh, that's not us.
That's not us.
They
Never
put
mind.
that
Got it.
slide is the equivalent of the
Music playing.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna
with a hook to
pull us off the
just
stage.
I want to thank you.
Thank
I want to
you.
thank my
Yeah.
panelists
Thank you all so much.
so much.
We still have time.
Okay.
Questions.
I'll take it in. I'll be quick. Hey guys, thank you so much for this talk. It's been really compelling. My question is, can you expand a little bit more on connection and community, and how that is, how these technologies, or how you're thinking about these technologies impacting that? Because I know for me, meditation is a very personal experience, but it has also helped in the way I communicate and connect with other people. And so in that way, while it's personal, it is also very much, part of my interaction with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe community for you, and then I'll make a point after that.
I mean, that's what we're hoping to develop with Maloka, right? A community of meditators. But then, the dream is sort of, to have co-presence, right? Where you can sort of, I'll meet you, on said island, and we'll do a meditation together, or we'll do a sound bath together.
Or go to a big meditation with
Yeah.
2,000 other people or 200,
Exactly.
There'll be a lot of options as the versions as it keeps growing.
As we keep dreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for me, it's like one of the, I haven't read the paper in depth, but there's been sort of like, there was a paper that just came out about a month and a half ago, and they're looking for the neurocorrelates of group flow. And when we figure that out, because how many people have experienced flow individually? Whether you're like working or skiing or whatever, like we all have. But group flow,
Oh, I can tell you.
that's magic.
So that's coming from the body, and I'll tell you that is on its way. We just need the technology. We need to be able to have either multiple. There's some latency issues, I think, in VR, right? So the problem is sometimes that my experience, it's hard to sync up across people, but I'll tell you that physiological synchrony, which is similar to group flow, is coming for sure.
That's amazing, because here's what I think is going to happen. So I think one of the reasons why the sense of proliferation is important is because, and here's my theory without a medical degree or anything, so with all of that authority, on what I think happens. I think there's a pace setter
100%.
in group flow.
No, you don't have, that's 100% true.
Oh, great, good.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
I think there's a pace setter. And
Yeah.
so with the proliferation of sensors, like imagine smart fabrics and everything, I think it'll probably happen at the World Cup. And what will happen is because there's so many different cases, like group flow always happens at least 1 or 2 times at the World Cup. And so what I think will happen is that there'll be a period of time where every team is coated with sensors, where there's cameras everywhere. And you all know that when you see group flow, whether you're watching jazz or something, the room almost shifts. You know you're seeing you're seeing a group of people who have become one, and there's something in it. And so I think with the proliferation of sensors, what will happen is we will witness group flow. And as soon as we witness it, then we can we can machine learning all the data and see what it is, and then we can start to recreate it, because what will happen, we like to be together.
It feels good, so I'll tell you.
We like to be together. And so when that happens, it will change society when we can on-demand group flow.
That's right.
And 10 years from now, we'll be sitting on the stage, not 10 years, probably longer, but there'll be a period we'll be sitting on the stage.
I think 10.
And, okay, 10. And you guys will be like, what's the greatest problem? We're all going to be like, those kids, they just won't do solo consciousness. Don't they understand?
There's something useful about being by yourself.
You need to be alone inside your head.
That's awesome.
We'll be but I'm like, let's get some new problems. Like humanity can use some new problems. We've been doing the same stuff for a long time. Let's try something new. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely.
Amazing, thank you.
So we got time for 1 minute question, 1 minute response.
Okay.
Sounds great.
So
We'll try to keep it short.
I will keep it really short. And so first of all, very inspiring.
Great.
Really loved that panel. And the second is a question: how consistent is your data that you actually get?
Me or there?
In general, it's like because
I'll let you
at least the feedback that I get from my own body is very confusing. I collect a lot of data, and it's very hard for me to say.
Gosh, you are hitting on the most important thing, which is that somebody needs to help you make meaning of that data. So there are a couple of different pieces of that. So the consistency, people are generally fairly consistent if you give them the right context, right? So if you put similar people of a similar age, maybe even the same gender in a similar context, you'll start to see consistency. But once you start to remove those very clear areas, you start to see a lot of variability. And what I will say is variability is the norm in the body. That is 100% the case. Right. But there are some ways to make meaning of that variability. And one of the things that's actually super powerful, I know it sounds goofy to say, is machine learning, right? So the best thing about machine learning is that it's capable of learning from a stream of data that comes in, and you don't actually need to have a top-down reason in order to find the pattern, right? So the data continues to come in, and it just sort of when you were sitting down and reading email, we noticed there was a series of spikes in your I don't know, pupillometry and also in your physiology of various kinds, and we think it's when you read emails from your boss that you get really upset. Well, they don't need to know that you're reading emails from your boss in order to make that distinction. And so I feel like machine learning is actually, it is a bit of a black box, but if you help it contextualize with information, it can be incredibly both consistent and helpful, because you're right, we don't know most of the time why we do the things we do. But patterns can still emerge. And certainly from sensors, the data is very consistent. Our sensors have gotten incredibly good. They're not perfect, but they have gotten very, very good thanks to things like Apple Watches and Fitbits. Our mobile sensing is very advanced. So
I think we're getting
I think we're really going to get kicked off, but I'm happy to continue having this conversation if you're interested.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.